Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow and welcome to this week's Tech Takeaways.
And I'm Jason. Welcome.
Have you got a surname?
Yeah, Fitzgerald.
Excellent. Just so people know, because hey, this might be the first time you've seen our podcast in 2024. We've also got our dynamic co-host, Wayne Miller. Hi, Wayne.
Hi.
So, yeah, thanks for joining in. And you will have noticed, or possibly noticed, depending on which camera we're on, that we've also got our first guest for this year. And our first guest this year is Dave Ferry. Hi, Dave.
Hi.
Hi, Dave.
Again, a long hello there. I'm liking the one-word intros that everybody's giving me today. Got lots to work with, Jace, here, haven't we? So on this week's episode, we're going to be talking about something that's certainly a new area for me.
Yeah.
And this is the idea of talking about connectivity, but talking about connectivity beyond kind of your standard internet connection, you know, where you phone the carrier of choice, a well-known national carrier of choice. Let's not slander anybody right now. Get your internet connectivity and you kind of go from there. But we're going to dig into some alternatives to that. And that's why we've got Dave here, because I've got absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. But fortunately, Wayne and Dave, and this is going to be a rare treat for people watching this, is that it's me and you who've got no idea what's going on.
I've got my notebook ready for this.
And actually, it's Wayne who is doing all of the educating.
Well, Jason's only spent a night on it and he already knows more than my 20-odd years in the industry. So well done, Jason.
So we're on dodgy ground.
But before we jump into the topic, Dave, firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And why don't you give us a kind of a little bit of an introduction to who you are and what it is you do?
So my name's Dave Ferry, as you've said. I lead our sales teams at ITS, so all of our partner sales teams. I'll come on to what that means in a little while through the conversation, no doubt. I lead those teams. I also have a second role as the Chief Commercial Officer of our joint venture partnership with the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, which again we can talk about a bit more. And I'm kind of primarily employed by ITS, who are technically an altnet. You might have heard that in the marketplace. That is an alternative to the incumbents. So traditionally, we've had a bit of a duopoly in the UK in terms of connectivity with Openreach, BT, and Virgin Media. And in about 2017, 2018, the regulator stepped in and said to Openreach, you've got to make your ducts available, your pipes under the ground. You've got to let other people put their cables through them. And that kind of sparked a boom in the marketplace in terms of other operators setting up to put fibre under the streets and provide better connectivity. And a big chunk of that market's gone after the residential customers and building out in the suburbs. And businesses like ITS, we've gone after businesses. We've gone for a B2B approach with what we do.
So, I mean, you used a phrase which is kind of going to be my first question. You used the phrase altnet. And the reason it was going to come up is because Wayne uses that phrase freely all of the time. And
Does he get it right, though, or is it?
Probably, but maybe not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think as Jason says, we actually don't know. So maybe we should start there.
Yeah, okay.
I suppose the first question that pops into my head is, firstly, what is an altnet? And secondly, why should I care?
Yeah. So an altnet, the name came from alternative network. It's a bit of a portmanteau of those two things with a bit of abbreviation in there.
Dave, you're already raising the level of this podcast by using phrases like portmanteau.
Words like portmanteau. I think we can get some more of those in here.
You can come back, definitely.
I sound like I know what I'm talking about if I use words like that. So you had BT and you had Virgin Media, who sprung up kind of from a load of cable companies in the 90s. So if you go back kind of 30 years, Margaret Thatcher said, well, they don't like this whole monopoly thing that the BT's got. Obviously, the Conservative government in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, were all about private sector, growing markets, open market, free market kind of trade. And she didn't really like, Margaret Thatcher, that you had this national kind of monolith in BT. So she gave out all these franchise licenses to cable operators who came in from the States, built out their cable networks, and then that all kind of came together over the years after that, came together to be Virgin Media. So you ended up in this situation where you had Openreach and you had Virgin Media, and that was kind of it. And actually the investment into better speeds, better connectivity in the UK was relatively poor compared to other kind of nations around the world. So if you look out to the Far East, they had fibre everywhere and gigabit capable connectivity way sooner than we have here. And even some of our closer neighbours in Europe were getting a march on us. So in kind of late 2010s, Ofcom stepped in and said, you've got to do something about this. BT, you've got a monopoly. You need to open up your assets, your ducts, your poles. You need to let other people use those, other operators use those. And you've ended up with this massive, massive boom in the marketplace. There's about 150 altnets, alternative networks have sprung up. The other kind of low regulatory change that happened was the telecommunications code came into practice, and that meant operators could apply to be given permission to work on the public highway without having to get planning permission every single time they do something. So you've then got this boom of operators. There's 150 altnets out there building network. Some have been more successful than others. A lot of them have gone after residential homes, and actually that's, from a business case perspective, going after residential homes is quite easy. There's a house there, someone lives in it, I'll sell to them. When you look at B2B, which is what ITS do, it's a bit more nuanced. So you've got a building there that you pass, but the landlord might have carved it up for one big, massive multinational to take some space in. They might move out, and then the landlord carves it up, and now it's a co-working space and 40 other small units, and now there's 40 businesses in there. And it's harder to sell to businesses than it is to residents typically, which is why a lot of the market went after those residents. But for us at ITS, we saw the fact that nobody was really going after the B2B market as a massive opportunity to do something different. And that B2B market really had been massively cornered by Virgin Media and Openreach, and their leased lines, basically Virgin or BT leased lines. It's kind of, they had that whole market to themselves for a long time.
Yeah, I think when I think back of kind of firewall installations that I've done over the years, when you talk to a business and you say, who's your provider, 5 years ago it was, we've got a core line with BT and we've got a backup line with Virgin, and that was probably 90% of cases. So it sounds like the altnets have introduced a lot more options, maybe competition price wise as well with that.
Definitely, yeah. And I think none of the altnets are saddled with a back book of revenue they need to protect. So when you're BT Group or your Virgin Media, you're bringing in however many billions of pounds a year, your investors and your shareholders are saying protect that at all costs. So what you have certainly seen in a lot of the Openreach fibre rollout, they've gone into residential areas rather than business, and some cynics in the industry think that's because they want to protect those high value lease line revenues in those B2B areas, rather than they don't have that to protect in the residential areas. They can just go and flip those on and save a load of money. But because those operators don't have that legacy backbook, also got brand new technology, less faults, less issues, and often running much leaner businesses, with a lot lower overhead, being able to be quite aggressive on price.
Yeah, I think having alternative options for connectivity is important. I think more so now than it has been ever before, because we're seeing a trend with SD-WAN. People bringing in multiple connections into one firewall and kind of managing it that way. So if you've only got two options, you've only got two options.
Absolutely.
But now you can have, maybe 5 connections into one firewall, maybe 10.
Depends what
entirely up to you.
Depends where you're at in your building, where you're located. You might still have Openreach, you might still have Virgin.
Okay.
You might be an ITS there. You might be able to get a 5G solution. You might be able to get a satellite solution. And really, there's a lot more options. You're right for businesses now. And I do think businesses have always, a lot more so than residents, have bought through smaller local operators. They've bought through the channel. They've not necessarily gone direct to a BT or a Virgin for that service. They've gone to a local operator like yourselves and said, I want all this stuff. And one of the decisions we made at ITS in the early days when we started building network was we don't sell direct to end user markets. We sell through the channel. And one of the reasons we did that was, the comments you've made there around SD-WAN. Our partners can be experts in all of those different things, whether that's SD-WAN, whether that's voice over IP, whether that's some kind of cloud hosting, whatever it is, but they can use our connectivity to underpin the solution that they're building. And then we've got partnerships with all those big national incumbents that we've talked about, so that either where we've not got network or where one of our customers wants a resilient solution. We can bring our network in and some Openreach, and bring our network in and some Virgin. Some instances bring in all three, but we can be that one-stop shop.
And you can manage that whole piece. That's really powerful, actually. Yeah.
So maybe just as because one of the things that interests me, and I said in the introduction about the kind of why should I care, and I suppose lots of reasons that you might want to care there, commercial, obviously, but I suppose as the world has changed, and in the way we build our infrastructure and the way organisations operate from multiple locations, from a technology point of view, what are organisations like yours? Yours and your competitors, the altnets. What do you bring in to kind of the average business that says here's all the reasons you might because it's not about a race to the bottom price wise necessarily. This what are you delivering? What kind of new capabilities can you bring to an organisation that maybe multi-sited, wants a good internet connection as well? What kind of things are you guys bringing?
So we're deploying the latest technology. We've built majority of our footprint's been built in the last 2 years. So we're deploying that with the latest kit. So once you've got your fibre under the ground, that'll be there for a long time. A bit like copper's been under the ground for 150 years, whatever, 100, 120 years maybe. The fibre that's under the ground, going under the ground now, that'll be in the ground for a while. And the beauty is the kit that you put on the end of it is what drives that bandwidth through that. It's just a bit of glass. A couple of guys in our business, he said, get technical, so it's just glass and plastic. Just a bit of glass and plastic. Just plastic and glass under the ground, and I don't know why you're worried about it. But the real cleverness is the stuff you stick on the end of it, whether that's in a data center, whether it's in a BT exchange, which are like mini data centers these days that operators like ITS can take space in and then route our kit through their ducts, or whether it's something you put on in the customer's premises. You can go from being able to serve a relatively low bandwidth connection to a business. And then as they scale and grow, just by changing the kit on either end of that fibre, you can upgrade their bandwidth, you can give them more and more capability, you can give them a dedicated service rather than a contended one, for example. So contended one being you're sharing your backhaul with your neighbours, dedicated mean it's all yours all the way back to the other end. And we can take those customers through that journey with our partners by putting different kit on the end of that fibre, and we're using the latest what's called XGS PON technology. So that's 10 gig symmetrical PON, which I won't bore you with all the details and get too technical, and don't want to switch anybody off who's watching or listening, but it's really kind of maintenance free. There's no active components between the distribution point of the network and the customer premises, which means there's loads less points of failure, which means fibre networks inherently, whether they're ours or someone else's, are much more reliable than the old copper network because there's no amplification needed over much longer distances, which means everything's passive from the point of distributing your signal to the point of the customer's kit picking it up.
It's a lot more scalable then, isn't it, for organisations? The legacy networks. You want to make a change. You were talking like a fresh installation, weren't you? So scalability, flexibility, and high bandwidth.
That's it. Yeah. And we'll see more of that come through. So one of the challenges with that at the minute, speaking openly, is the cost of the customer premise equipment, CPE as we call it in the industry. CPE that can handle a 10 gig connection is way more expensive than CPE that can handle a 1 gig connection, but that's coming down. So at some point in the next 6 to 12 months, we expect we'd be able to deploy a customer everything on a 10 gig bearer. And that depends on the market shift and for the kit, etc. But your customer could take 100 meg service now, and without having to have any separate installations, we'll be able to take them all the way up to a 10 gig service if their needs demanded. And I think very few people at the minute need all that bandwidth. Some do. Businesses like podcast studios, like we're sat in now, they need
to just thinking of exactly these boys. They need on demand, don't they?
Transferring loads of files all the time, big content, 4 cameras, one on each of us, which is a bit scary, and they need it. But there's a lot of other businesses that don't. Software like Teams, etc. It's all dead compressed. So if you're just running a normal office business, you probably need it less. But the more that bandwidth's available from operators like us and the incumbents, they'll catch up, and we've seen them be much more aggressive since there's loads of altnets challenging them. Then clever people, cleverer than me, maybe as clever as you guys, will come up with killer applications that need all this bandwidth. I think I sold mobile phones a number of years ago, and when I started out selling mobile phones, you had the Network 3, the one that's just about to be bought by Vodafone. And they were the first 3G network. Coverage was patchy, the handsets were massive, the battery life was terrible, and you could only video call somebody else who had one of these terrible clunky handsets where you can maybe get 3 minutes of talk time. So it didn't take off. Everyone was kind of, what's this thing? And the network operators had spent all these billions on these licenses. Until Apple launched the 3G iPhone, the second iteration of the iPhone, which could do FaceTime.
It's massive, yeah.
Then everybody suddenly wanted 3G, and then everybody suddenly wanted 4G because they had this smartphone, this computer in their pocket. But there was a killer application. You could video call anyone, anywhere in the world. You've got family in Australia, you've got family in America that can video call each other with these devices through the internet or through the mobile networks. So suddenly everybody needed this bandwidth that was available. And I do liken where we're at now to that. So we're building all these networks, got all this bandwidth, all this capability. No one's really come up yet with that killer application that means we need 1 gig or 10 gig or 50 gig or 100 gig connectivity because they've just not come up with it yet.
Yeah.
But if the network's not there, no one will ever come up with it. So we're really building for the future by upgrading all networks right around the world for people to come up with this stuff. I don't know whether it's AI or what, but something's going to use it.
Well, that was our a previous topic, wasn't it? Yeah. Dave, just I really only know ITS from the developments in Liverpool, but ITS are a national
Maybe
player,
one day.
aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, so we're a national player. We've got networks right across the UK. Typically, we're south of the M62. Our networks, we've got a big cluster in the northwest, including the Liverpool network that you're mentioning there, Wayne.
Yeah.
We've got networks in the Midlands, so kind of Birmingham, Wednesbury, all that kind of patch in the West Midlands. We've got Nottingham, Derby, etc. in the East Midlands. We've got massive footprint in London and a bit in the southwest, kind of Bristol, Gloucester, Cheltenham. Yeah, our London coverage is huge, and our network passes now 25% of UK business premises, which is huge. It makes us the third biggest B2B operator behind Openreach and Virgin Media.
And for organisations that are kind of on that network, it sounds to me like what they're getting, high bandwidth, really low latency, so almost like they've got Ethernet plugging into all of these
absolutely.
sites. So is that opening lots of opportunities for them to be doing, when we talked about podcasting before, we talked to guys here about maybe some of the way they might want to architect in the future as they have multiple studios. Are you seeing the idea that people are looking at that and thinking, because we've seen a real shift towards organisations not wanting their IT infrastructure in their buildings anymore. So it starts with a conversation about, let's move to cloud. But quickly they look at some of the complexity and say, well, could we just move it to a colo facility somewhere? And then the issue becomes, latency becomes a start of a problem.
Yeah.
But actually, in these kind of instances, if you're looking at doing that, if you've got a data center on that same network, would I be right to think you're almost getting Ethernet speed between all of these locations?
Yeah. So we can do that in Liverpool now. We're in some of the proximity sites, and if business wanted point to point between that and their office in the city centre, run that through our network, no problem at all. What we are seeing though, a few years ago, everybody would be buying MPLS solutions, so they're buying a private network effectively between their sites, and they might have some internet breakouts on it. So they basically link all their sites together in a ring or in a star topology, and then they'd bring some internet in a couple of locations and share that out across the network.
Yeah.
What we're seeing with the advent of SD-WAN right across the private and public sector is the IT teams are saying, nah, just give me good bandwidth internet connections and I'll use SASE, I'll use SD-WAN, I'll use whatever else to manage all the security, all the firewall and all the bandwidth requirements. You might take a private link into Amazon or Google or whatever. They might take a private link into a private colo DC as part of that. But for their site-facing connectivity, we're just seeing a lot more internet connections being procured, and then their IT teams are configuring other things on top of it, or partners like Gardner are configuring things with that, so they're just buying internet connectivity.
Yeah, we're seeing that's what we're seeing now, Jason, isn't it? Dual ISP, couple of SD-WAN boxes, no single points of failure, and it's why we're kind of working with you guys.
Absolutely.
I think businesses are looking to be more resilient. We see a lot of cyber attacks, a lot of cybersecurity is, a hot topic. And so businesses are keen to identify the risk. So the risk is we've got one internet connection. Okay, how do we fix that? Put more than one in. But also, we've only got one location. How do we resolve that? We could essentially stretch the land based on what you were saying there, so that we've got a real-time DR location on a network.
Yeah.
So that should an incident happen in the primary site, can pretty much instantly fail over to the secondary. It's on the network, and then because of the bandwidth that ITS are providing back, they're getting quite a good performance anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. You can have that. I think there's two schools of thought in a lot of businesses, and like I say, we trade through our partners to the end users, but I think in that end user marketplace, there's two schools of thought. The first one is what you've just said there. I need to be secure. I need resilience. I need this, that, the other. And sometimes that's driven by something's gone wrong. They've had a cyber attack. They've had an outage that's meant they couldn't trade, and that's the
risk is
catalyst
then
for them.
identified.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
The other cohort you've got is it'll never happen to me, and there's still a big chunk of businesses out there who've just got one connection. They probably haven't got the best security in place. They haven't done, and until something happens to them, they just see it as a cost they don't need to bear within their business. And times aren't as affluent as they were. Interest rates are higher. It's harder to finance your business. And I think if there's a lot of businesses out there going, well, I'll worry about that when I have to worry about it, or just burying their head in the sand because they don't understand it.
Needs must.
Well, Dave, look,
sometimes.
as we look to kind of wrap up on this episode, I suppose one final question for you is, so somebody's watching this and thinking, well, some of this sounds interesting to me, I'm still not 100% sure what an altnet might do for me. What would be some of the use cases that maybe for businesses looking at that they should be coming and talking to you? Yeah,
I mean, through our partners, we've done all kinds of things. We've done connections for multinational businesses, connecting retail units. We've done everything in between from that to a small business just taking a singleton connection. But if they want to find out more, they can have a look on our website, see what we've got going on. Just Google ITS, will come up, ITS Technology Group on there. You can reach out to the team through there as well, and you can find out who our partners are so they can buy, or they could speak to someone like Gardner Systems as well and find out kind of what can we do together. Not saying that'll always be the right angle for them. We're kind of impartial with our partners, and that's one of the reasons we choose to work through partners. But anything from retail through to high bandwidth applications like a podcast studio, we've kind of done it all right across all the different partners we've worked with.
Well, Dave, look, it's been great. Wayne, Jason,
yeah, thanks, Dave.
Thanks for your time as well. Appreciate it. And I've learnt loads. So at least now know what an altnet is. I've got a rough idea what one does. So now I'll probably ask you a whole bunch of other questions now once we finish recording. So Dave, really appreciate your time. Thanks very much. And to make sure you catch all episodes of Tech Takeaways and do subscribe, you can subscribe here on YouTube, or you can subscribe in wherever you get your podcasts. So until next time, thanks for watching. See you again soon.
Thank you.